بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the ever merciful. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafi khalqillahi ajma'een. And may Allah Ta'ala grant peace to and raise the status of the noblest and finest of His creation, the Messenger Muhammad, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een, and that of his family and companions, all of them. Amma ba'd. This piece of advice is for my brothers and sisters in Islam who are facing a great amount of confusion in this day and time regarding the correct path of Islam, the correct teachings in Islam, the correct understanding of the methodology of Islam, how to interact with those who are not Muslims and those who are misguided Muslims, or those who ascribe to Islam and have left the fold of Islam because of their deviancy, and so on. Ahl Sunnah and the doctrine of Ahl Sunnah, of the people of the Sunnah and the Jama'ah, is under violent, ongoing attack from one of the most deviant, aggressive cults of people who ascribe to Islam. They are known as Al-Ikhwaan al-Muslimun, the Muslim Brotherhood. And from their goals and their aims is to replace the political system in Islam, the governmental system in Islam, which they are not pleased with the Western non-Muslim understanding of governments, of politics, of how societies are to be run from the leadership and from those who would assist or support or vote for and so on their leadership. Aside from other goals, this goal requires them to insist that the Muslims drop their wala and their bara, their allegiance to Tawheed and to the people of Tawheed, and their animosity and hatred from those who oppose the call to Tawheed. This relationship called al-wala wal-bara that a Muslim has with the other human beings on this earth is one of the most essential, most important, most core foundations of Islam, as expressed by the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, when he said, "Awthaq ura al-iman an tuhibba lillahi wa tubghidha lillah." The firmest handholds of Iman, something that you grab onto and hold to, is loving for the sake of Allah and hating for the sake of Allah. Love and hatred for the sake of Allah is a foundation in Islamic beliefs. Whoever has embraced Islam, in truth, has embraced a system of beliefs that necessitates love and hatred. Love of Tawheed and its people, love of the Sunnah and its people, love of Iman, faith and its people, and hatred of polytheism and its people, love of hatred of kufr, of disbelief and its people, hatred of innovation and its people, to the level that their innovation requires us to hate them. These concepts are essential in Islam, and again founded by our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, understood and enacted by the noble companions of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, those who would turn away from the people of innovation, like Abdullah ibn Umar, when they came to him, as collected by Al-Imam Muslim in his Sahih, when they came to him informing him of people who rejected al-qadr, called today the Qadariyah. They said things happen without Allah knowing about them. They denied Allah's divine plan and organization of the events in this universe called al-qadr. They denied it using their rational intellect. He said, if you meet such people, أخبرهم أني بريء منهم, inform them that I am free of them. وأنهم براء مني, and they are free of me. And then he went on to say, if they spent a whole mountain's weight of gold in the path of Allah, it would never be accepted from them until they believed in Qadr. So, when the Qadariyah came, the Sahaba would warn against them, would declare them to be outside of Islam, and show open hatred and animosity and freedom from them. Hatred and animosity for them and freedom of them. I am free of so-and-so. And the other innovators that appeared from the Murji'ah, the Shee'ah, the Jahmiyyah, and so on. Ahl Sunnah have a methodology with regards to these people, and it is not cooperation and coming together upon what we agree upon. That is not the methodology of Islam. That is the methodology of al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun, the Muslim Brotherhood. Know your Salafiyya. Know the path of your Salaf in truth. Don't let people come to you and quote, Ta'awanu ala al-birri wa taqwa. All of you cooperate upon righteousness and piety. We say, yes, we cooperate upon righteousness and piety. This ayah is upon us as it was understood by the companions, not as al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin understand it. But we cooperate. We come together as Allah has ordered us to do, upon bir and taqwa, upon righteousness and piety, in the ways understood by the companions, the tabi'un who followed their way, and the early imams who were upon their way in righteousness. We don't come together and hold hands with the enemies of Allah, with those who have opposed the tawheed of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, with those who call upon their imams, with those who make their imams higher in status than the messengers, like the Rawafid of the Shee'ah. We don't come together with them and hold hands with them and say this is a time for unity and we shall put aside our differences and so on. That is the methodology of al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun, the Muslim Brotherhood, not the methodology of Islam, not the methodology of the Book of Allah or the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as understood by the companions. Recently, one of the self-made heads of al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, someone who has put himself forward to be now a vocal spokesperson for al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, their ideology, their beliefs, their manhaj, whether this person openly admits it or not, that person's name is Yasir Qadhi. That person's name is Yasir Qadhi. Someone who studied in the Islamic University of Al-Medina for a period of about 10 years, and was blessed by Allah Ta'ala to be in the company of scholars of Islam, notable, noteworthy, widely renowned, recognized scholars of Islam, known all over the world. Blessed with this for 10 years, to reach the level of a master's in Islamic theology. Blessed to be able to identify the filth and falsehood of various sects in Islam, and to warn against them to some degree, while those who knew him in his days of study there were observant enough to know that he did not have the true foundations that come from studying from the senior scholars and taking their manhaj of stability, their manhaj of being firm in the Salafi manhaj, in the reality of the truth of the book and the Sunnah. He did not take their manhaj, but he was here and there, as was observed by his classmates and some of his teachers as well. This individual has now reached the world stage. He has now reached a point where, after leaving Al-Medina in the Christian year of 2005, going back to America, he enrolled in a university called Yale University. And from the years of 2005 to 2013, this individual studied under a number of the enemies of Islam in an Islamic studies program, beginning again with the master's program, the entire postgraduate program of master's and PhD studies, under Shiite, Jews, Christians, atheists, Sufis, those whose Islam may or may not be valid, and so on. Perhaps there were, in fact, in that group of so-called scholars of Islam, or scholars about Islam, there may have been a Muslim or two. Allah knows best about their Islam. But what is obvious is they are a gathering of people who do not believe in Islam as a hukm al-ghalib, as a ruling on the what seems to be most apparent from them, and they have the agenda of miseducating Muslims or turning Muslims into people of confusion and doubts, and those who would spread doubts and confusion on behalf of these senior Orientalists, people who study Islam in order to manipulate the Muslims, in order to manipulate Muslim beliefs for the news and the media organizations and so on. Not people who study Islam for the sake of benefiting from Islam. He has learned from them for a period of 8 years in their full-time courses of study. He has enrolled in them and studied under these people. Do not think that 10 years of Medina will grant a person immunity to face whatever the most capable enemies and most knowledgeable enemies of Islam about Islam would say to confuse and lead a person astray. Do not think Yasir Qadhi is immune. For verily over the past 8-9 years, the reality is the biggest testimony against this methodology of trying to gain recognition from Western academics, trying to become acceptable to them, trying to become recognized by them for whatever goal that a person has, seeking to gain their recognition and their acceptance for some kind of benefit. That methodology is a filthy methodology, and it will only corrupt an individual, as we will see from examples from the real teachings of Yasir Qadhi, insha'Allah ta'ala. With this, you're going to see that recently, this man Yasir Qadhi, may Allah ta'ala guide him, has explained his studying under someone like Tony Blair, former Prime Minister of the UK. Tony Blair. Tony Blair, who has a faith foundation, who recognizes Islam as a threat to world powers that be, and he has set up this faith foundation to become the medium of dialogue, as he has expressed explicitly from his own mouth, to help Muslims recognize their need to be involved in democracy. He wants Muslims, and he wants to use whatever he can learn about Islam, whatever he can use to engage a Muslim with who has influence on others, to teach him to accept democracy. And what does it mean to accept democracy? From the Ikhwaanee point of view, they will say, I wasn't learning Islam from Tony Blair. Like Yasir Qadhi says explicitly, I wasn't learning hadith or tafsir, or he says fiqh. I wasn't learning fiqh from Tony Blair. He admits that he studied an entire course under Tony Blair. Yet he says, I would not learn, and I did not learn tafsir, hadith, or fiqh from Tony Blair, while he admits that the course was about faith and world politics. So first of all, faith is an issue. He says not only was the course about Islam, so the course was about Islam to some degree, and the course was about politics. Now I want you to watch out for one of the many tricks of al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin. They say, I'm studying politics, and it's a general, as Yasir says, generic science or generic kind of knowledge which you can learn from anyone. We say, Al-Islam is a complete way of life, Yasir. Politics is a bab min abwab al-fiqh. Politics, how a government is run, how leaders are selected, how people must interact with their rulers, how judgments are to be made, how a society is to be run, how inheritance is distributed, how marriages are to be overseen or supervised, how divorces are to be recorded. The way a society is run governmentally is an Islamic chapter of fiqh, or a series of Islamic chapters in our fiqh books. You know this, Yasir Qadhi knows this very well. In all books of fiqh, the chapters go and they reach at the end al-qada and al-siyasa al-shar'iyya and things like that. Aside from all books of fiqh having chapters near the end about government, about politics, about these issues, you find even great scholars have written books throughout history singling out politics, like al-siyasa al-shar'iyya by Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, many of his fatawa, and so on. Great scholars of the past have singled out the issue of politics as an issue that must be taken from the book and the sunnah. So the Ikhwaanee Muslimin are not happy with the obligation of the everyday Muslim hearing and obeying the leaders and supporting leadership and staying with the jama'ah. They are unhappy with this in reality. And this leads them to embrace the Western ideas of democracy, which they will hide their intent by saying, we don't like democracy, but we only engage in it because we need to choose the lesser of two evils. This is the madkhal, this is their beginning, this is how they enter into politics, this is how they teach you to enter into politics. The end result is, you are a card-carrying member of a hizb siyasi, you are a Democrat, you are a Republican, you are going to debates between politicians, you are even spending money, you are even now giving your money to campaigns to sway their decisions, you are involved in all of the entire political system. As teachers from Yasir Qadhi's Al-Maghrib Institute, one by one, teach the people to do. Engage in the political system in totality, not with any limits, not with any restrictions, not with any fatwa from Ahlul Ilm. Total 100% involvement in the Western political system. And as you know, Yasir Qadhi, in his clear speech, has excused the scholars of Islam from having any fatwa that could be relevant to democracy in the West, under the guise of saying people who do not live in a secular democracy cannot give you a fatwa about living in a secular democracy. Meaning, we cannot accept their fatwas about voting, demonstrating, writing to Congress, as Yasir Qadhi has said explicitly from his own mouth. So Yasir Qadhi and the teachers under him, as he is the Dean of Academic Affairs for Al-Maghrib Institute, you will notice the teachers in this organization of Ikhwaanee, this organization that is grounded in the methodology of Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin, the Muslim Brotherhood, whether they admit it and state it openly or whether they hide it, the methodology is clear for those who know it. You are going to be invited to engage in the political process. You may be invited initially just to vote for someone who may benefit the Muslims in one election. And you're being told by mentioning some fatwa here and there that this is permissible. And there is grounds to that in some of the fatwa of Ahlul Ilm. But they take that, and the end result of all of it is you have an obligation of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil. And this day and time, enjoining the good and forbidding the evil means voting. And they substitute entirely all of the chapters of Islamic fiqh on politics and governmental policies. All of that is now replaced, and you are engaged. You are learning the way and the manner of engaging the Western democratical political system as if you were learning the Islamic chapters of fiqh. Isn't that amazing? Instead of learning how Islamic governments are run from the fiqh books of Islam, you are studying from kafir, Western, non-Muslim politicians how to behave as a voter, how to behave as a funder, how to behave as an activist within a Western democratic political system. Look at the end result of the deviation. It is not that as simple as they would try to convince you in the very beginning, that we're just simply voting to get a benefit or to save the Muslims from some harm that an enemy, a clear enemy who's open, wants to implement once he gets into office. So voting against him is to keep harm away from the Muslims. That's just the introduction, Ikhwan. So they are paving the way for the non-Muslim system, for the kafir system of ruling the people by what the majority say. You can connect this to all of their teachings, and we'll do that in a separate audio, insha'Allah ta'ala, about how they need to endorse the idea, they need to promote the idea that Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the people of the Sunnah, and the Jama'ah, the word Jama'ah needs to be twisted, it needs to be corrupted, it needs to be changed from its original meaning understood by the Tabi'un, by the early Imams of Islam. It needs to be changed to an understanding today of the majority, that you are with the majority. Why is it so important for them to keep pushing the idea that the majority of the Muslims are rightly guided? Because that's what we need to understand for us to say the majority vote is valid. The majority vote is something that will bring progress, because the majority of the Muslims are rightly guided. However, there are multitudes of evidence against this statement that the majority of the Muslims are guided. The word Jama'ah in the phrase Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah was never intended to mean the majority. The Jama'ah in many times throughout history was one man or a small group of people. And the Prophet ﷺ defined the correctly guided Muslims amongst all the different firq as one firqa from amongst 72 firqas. And they play with numbers and say, yes, but all of the others are small. And Ahl Sunnah is huge in comparison. Tuba lil ghuraba, as our Prophet ﷺ said, give glad tidings to the ghuraba, because Islam began as something gharib. Islam began as something strange. What's strange? The majority of the people are on something and you come with something different. That's what strangeness is. That's how Islam began, and that's how Islam will return. And wallahi, you can see in today's society that a Muslim practicing his religion properly, with the proper aqeedah, not the aqeedah and manhaj of Ikhwaanee Muslimin, but practicing his aqeedah properly, he is indeed a gharib. He is indeed a stranger, a small minority amongst the masses of both Muslims and non-Muslims. Sadly, this is our case. It has happened throughout history. For someone to claim that the majority of the people are rightly guided, the majority of the Muslims are rightly guided, it goes against numerous texts that we've mentioned in other talks, and it goes against the very fabric of the reality of what we see in front of us. So it is only a tool, it is only a trick used by Ikhwaanee Muslimin to make you think that voting has a valid basis in the Sharia, because all of the Muslims or the majority of the Muslims will vote, and that means the correct decision will be made by the majority, and that is bridging the gap between Western democracy and their fiqh of how politics are to be run and the Islamic religion, in a way of falsehood, of course. You will find Walid al-Basyuni, Hadahu Allah, may Allah Ta'ala guide him, who's very close to Yasir Qadhi and one of the top 3 or top people who run Al-Maghrib Institute. You will find him saying that Muslims have a right to vote by ijma'. All Muslim scholars and all councils of scholars endorse the Muslims' right to vote and in Muslims' involvement in the Western political system, falsely claiming this ijma'. In his endorsement, you can look it up in his official endorsement of Barack Obama, where he gave a political endorsement of one of the Western politicians. You will find as well many other evidences from their individual teachers and from Yasir himself. So the reality is, when he studies politics under Tony Blair, he's not studying a dunya science. He's studying a chapter from the chapters of fiqh, which is politics. It is an Islamic science. It is something that has been legislated by Allah. How a society is run, how the government is run, how the people are to interact with their government. All of that is fiqh. So the statement that he made that he's not learning fiqh from Tony Blair is only correct in the mind of an Ikhwaanee who has excused politics from being fiqh in the religion. Notice, as for the rest of the Muslims, politics is fiqh, and we learn our politics from the book and the sunnah. We learn our politics from how the companions understood politics from the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And like all chapters in fiqh, like all Islamic teachings, we believe with certainty, with unwavering certainty, that the Islamic system of politics is an upright, just, and complete system that will preserve all of the people's rights. In each and every time throughout history, Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun secretly hate this idea. They do not believe in it. Within themselves, they do not believe that the Islamic system of politics is appropriate for this day and time. They won't acknowledge it. They'll say, no, he's lying on Ikhwan al-Muslimin, but their reality that you see from their actions is a love and a devotion to ideas of democracy, an attachment, a severe, heavy attachment to concepts created by non-Muslims on how to rule, on how to run a society governmentally. And their stance on the Islamic Sharia, look at their stance on how the everyday Muslim is to interact with Muslim leadership. They wage war on the correct methodology of Islam. They hate it. They try to find holes in it. They try to make authentic hadith weak for the sake of getting rid of a sam' wa ta'a, the obligation to hear and obey the Muslim rulers in all affairs which are permissible. They don't want that system. They want what the West has raised its voice about. They want individual freedom to speak against rulers, individual freedom to criticize the rulers, to speak with satire and sarcasm and words of open criticism against their rulers, which is the way of the West today. And they view it to be a very high and moral way, that people have freedom, personal rights to speak about whatever they want. We say in Islam, no. Man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir falyaqul khayran aw liyasmut. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, then let him speak goodness or keep silent. A statement made against the ruler of the Muslims, even if he himself has disobedience. So long as he is a Muslim, the Muslim ruler is to be respected, and a statement said against him is one which sparks rebellion. It's one which brings chaos to the society. It's one which leads to unrest, civil unrest, a society like what you see in modern-day Egypt and in other countries that have attempted to adopt the Western approach to dealing with Muslim leadership. Do you not see that? Naam? So for someone to say he is not learning fiqh, for Yasir Qadhi to say he is not learning fiqh from Tony Blair, or he was not learning fiqh from Tony Blair when he took that course with him, is a lie. In reality, it is only truthful if you accept the foundation that politics is not from Islam. And politics is a dunya science that you can learn from anyone. We say, kadhabt, you have lied. The result is the best testimony for what I'm saying. That now you will find a Yasir Qadhi that is much different than a pre-Tony Blair Yasir Qadhi. You will find a Yasir Qadhi who tells you that you are to engage in the political system. And you did not find this with the pre-Tony Blair Yasir Qadhi, which shows that there has been a change. And you will notice that a group, an organization which represents the most vocal Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin in America, whether they have an open inscription or not, called ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America, who recently tried to build bridges and reach agreements between the Sunnis, between Ahl Sunnah that they believe to be, and the Rawafid, and the Shee'ah of Iran. The Shee'ah, those who, as you will see, Yasir Qadhi used to be very clear about, from their source books, as he will tell you. You will find that now he says, let Allah be the judge. Now he says a number of things which would lead you to think that there's no real big point of differing here, except that it can be excused and talked about later while we hold hands in unity. This is the new Yasir Qadhi, a complete contrast from the older Yasir Qadhi. The head of that organization, ISNA, has recognized this change. Muzammil Siddiqui, may Allah Ta'ala guide him, stood in front of the Shi'a and Sunni crowd, standing next to shoulder a large group of scholars or representatives of Iran. Shiite, Rawafid. You see them with their turbans and their clothes from Iran, standing there saying that Yasir Qadhi is a changed man. He is no longer anti-Shiite. And that's why ISNA has opened its doors and accepted this man to be a part of ISNA, the Islamic Society of North America. He made that statement out in the open at the same gathering where Yasir Qadhi was delivering speeches to this Sunni Shiite crowd about how some Muslims believe this and some Muslims believe that. Now, considering defamation of the Sahaba, cursing them, belief that the Imams know the unseen and they have a higher rank than the Prophets, and so on, all of this is now just an opinion held by some Muslims. It is no longer disbelief. It is no longer outside of Islam. It is no longer filth as he used to describe it. Now it is what some Muslims believe. Some thoughts in Islam or some schools in Islam believe that, as you can hear with your own ears from the lips of Yasir Qadhi in his recorded speech at ISNA. And as I will play for you, insha'Allah ta'ala, in this audio later on. The issue, aside from learning from Tony Blair directly about Islam, remember, politics is a bab from the abwab of fiqh. It is a chapter from the books of fiqh. It is not a non-Islamic science or some invented thing like computer technology that is a dunya science or other matters that have come about and we learn about them for the benefit of our dunya. Politics is something from Islam. So he has sought to replace the Islamic politics by excusing it from even being from Islamic teachings and claiming he is only learning, dunya, generic sciences from the non-Muslims. But if we stepped aside from that, which is a very false claim, we would find that for 8 years, for a period of 8 years, Yasir Qadhi was enrolled in the Religious Studies Department or the Islamic Studies Department of Yale University, studying from a number of Jews, Christians, Shiite, Sufis, atheists, and you name it, as we have mentioned already. Firstly, what is the ruling on studying from non-Muslims, studying Islam from non-Muslims, not studying mathematics or something that you might be forced to study from them, but studying Islam or choosing to study Islam from them voluntarily? You find that if you were to look at Islam riwayatan, what did the scholars of hadith accept from in the history of Islam, then the narration of a thiqah is only acceptable. The thiqah is the one who's adal, the reliable person. That's what the scholars of history, of Islamic history, the scholars of hadith throughout history, have considered to be someone acceptable to learn from. He's thiqah. Thiqah is two things. He's adal, he's an upright person, and he's dhabit, and he's precise in what he narrates. Before we go to what it means to be precise, what does it mean to be an upright person? The very first description is a Muslim and not a non-Muslim. The first condition of being upright, in order that your teachings of Islam are acceptable, is that you are a Muslim and not a non-Muslim. And then you are an adult and not a child. You are sane and not insane. You are a person of open piety, of outward piety, at least outward piety, and not a person of outward disobedience, and you're not a person who violates the custom of the time and place you live in. Those are the 5 conditions for a person to be considered upright or adal. Then he has to be precise, and his precision must be tested time and time again beyond that. So the very first condition for someone to have religion taken from him, as understood by our Salaf, is that a person is to be a Muslim. That's from the angle of riwayah. If we said, okay, well, in Allah's book, we have إِن جَاءَكُمْ فَاسِقٌ بِنَبَإٍ فَتَبَيَّنُوا. If a fasiq comes to you with some news, a fasiq meaning a Muslim who has open signs of disobedience, or he's known for an act of disobedience, he's known as a rebellious, disobedient person, then you are required to investigate such a teaching before you could accept it. That's from the book of Allah. If that's the case of a fasiq, a disobedient Muslim, then what would the case of a non-Muslim be? Subhanallah. If someone said, and the Ikhwaanees always say this, but the shaitan taught Abu Huraira ayat al-Kursi. We say, Ahl Sunnah, the Sahaba, the Tabi'un, we are people of haqq, those who follow in their way. We, insha'Allah, we are people of truth. We accept the truth however it reaches us. If truth comes to us from a Jew, we accept it once we verify it, once it is verified. However, we don't go as a result then to that Jew and sit under him and study. Abu Huraira, when he learned about reading Ayatul Kursi from the captive that he had, from the prisoner he took, who was trying to steal from Baytul Mal, from the treasury, he told him, if you read Ayatul Kursi, you will have protection during the night. He went to the Prophet ﷺ to verify that information, and once it was verified, he accepted it as an Islamic teaching. Abu Huraira did not seek him out to go and study from him after that. That's where the trick is in Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimin's use of that proof. Similarly, the Jews would come to the Prophet ﷺ and say something. إِنَّكُمْ تُشْرِكُونَ بِاللَّهِ تَقُولُونَ مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ وَشِئْتَ. You are committing an act of shirk with Allah. You're saying it is as Allah and you wish. They would address the Messenger ﷺ like that. The affair, when they saw something good, it is like how Allah wants and how you want. And the Prophet ﷺ, when hearing this from the Jew, he went and corrected the Muslims. He said, قُولُوا مَا شَاءَ اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ. Say, Allah, it is as Allah wishes alone, and leave it like that. So he accepted a teaching that came from the Jew. Did the Prophet ﷺ enroll in the study program of the Jews of Medina for a period of 8 years? La. Don't stretch the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ to include what was never intended to be included in it. You find fatwas as well from modern day scholars talking about the ruling on learning under the kuffar in their lands, especially Islamic teachings. And from the more well-known and widespread of those fatwa is the one from Sheikh Salih al-Fawzan, who said it is not permissible and it is corruptive. It is something that has always corrupted the children of the Muslims, that they send their children to learn from non-Muslims about Islam. Learning from non-Muslims about Islam. Furthermore, since we have ignorant Muslims, and I say ignorant here, meaning unstable, unaware of the true methodology of the Messenger ﷺ, they will go and study under the non-Muslims. So look at the effects. Look at the reality of what has taken place. You find them yesterday saying serious words of rebuke against Ahlul Bid'ah, whether they were truly understood or they were just parroted, but they said them. And now today, they make statements of endorsement, statements of defense, statements of criticism against Muslims who would have hatred for them. Subhanallah. You find them, Yasir Qadhi himself, you will find he wrote a master's thesis about the Jahmiyyah, about Jahm ibn Safwan himself and his beliefs and teachings. The one who the deviant sect called the Jahmiyyah is ascribed to. He says in his introduction to that writing, which is now a published book, under his name, it was an approved thesis at the University of Al-Medina. It was acceptable as knowledge to the professors at Medina University, that the Jahmiyyah, the reason why he studied this subject, the reason why he chose the topic, it's one of the things that goes in the introduction of a thesis. He said because the Jahmiyyah was one of the most dangerous sects, if not the most dangerous sect, against Islam and the Muslims. He said in his introduction that the teachings of the Jahmiyyah have infiltrated the teachings of almost all of the other sects in a way that no other sect has done. So the teachings were serious, had major effects on the ummah, very, very dangerous. And then he made his study. This was more than 8 years ago. This was the pre-Tony Blair Yasir Qadhi. Today, what does he say? The Jahmiyyah were a small band of people who really had no impact on people. But it was like a scholarly rite of passage to refute them. Even after they were gone and refuted, people still came and refuted them as a scholarly tradition. Meaning, it didn't really have any need. Essentially, what he didn't say is, it's a waste of time. So he says, even the Sahih al-Bukhari guy, he wrote a chapter against the Jahmiyyah. And he refers to Al-Imam Muhammad ibn Ismail al-Bukhari as the Sahih al-Bukhari guy. He wrote against the Jahmiyyah following some scholarly tradition like it didn't even matter. As he said, they were a small band of people. You could count them on your hands, or whatever he said about the lack of impact that they had on society and the lack of importance of refuting them. This is what he has said recently now, speaking about the same group that he said was from the most dangerous sects, whose teachings have infiltrated the teachings of many other sects and become a major source of corruption and danger to the Muslims. Has Yasir Qadhi changed? Absolutely, testified by the Ikhwaanees themselves. Yasir Qadhi is a changed man. Open stances of the past against Ahlul Bid'ah that were correct as open stances, and Allah Ta'ala knows best what was behind those open stances, but those were correct, now have been turned into the exact opposite. Before we had serious words of rebuke, of wala and bara. Now we have a language change. Now we're being told, don't preach hatred. We're being told not to preach hatred. And we heard from our Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in the beginning of this audio, his statement, alayhi salatu wassalamu, may Allah raise his rank and grant him peace. أوثق عرى الإيمان الحب في الله والبغض في الله أو أن تحب في الله وتبغض في الله. The most firmest handholds of faith is that you love for the sake of Allah and that you hate for the sake of Allah. Now he says, don't preach a hatred. I would like to draw your attention just before I show you one comparison of the old Yasir Qadhi and the new Yasir Qadhi. Just before that, I would like to draw your attention to something that Yasir has acknowledged and admitted openly recently in the UK. He acknowledged and he affirmed that he has benefited from from Tony Blair, from the course that he studied under Tony Blair at Yale University about politics and faith. He says that he openly admits that yes, he benefited from Tony Blair. And one example, the only example he gives of what he specifically benefited from in that question and answer, and it was uploaded by Yasir Qadhi to his own YouTube channel, something he wishes to publicize. So I'm not bringing out anything that's secret. It's an open teaching that was openly recorded, and he himself has openly uploaded this to his YouTube channel. That he has benefited from the sihr of Tony Blair, from the magical rhetoric, the speech habits, or the ways of turning the crowd, or moving the crowd, or affecting people with sihr al-bayan. And he quoted the hadith, Inna min al-bayani la sihra, that verily some kinds of speech is magical. I'd like you to understand this hadith from our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is authentic, and it refers to two affairs. The first affair is an invitation to use good speech to adorn the truth and make it understandable, to make it to show it in its true light, to explain it in a good way, so that the people love it and embrace it. And that kind of bayan is from the sihr of bayan. So it is an encouragement to speak the truth in a beautiful way. And that would be a praiseworthy kind of sihr, a praiseworthy kind of magic linguistically. Sihr al-bayan. And from the scholars of the past, Al-Imam al-Bukhari, he came with some new styles of authorship, like a Tarikh al-Kabir, which was not understood by many people because it was perhaps the first time anyone ever wrote a book of biographies in alphabetical order in the 3rd century. It was ahead of its time. And so some of the scholars said, I don't understand it. I've read it 3 times and I just don't understand what this book is. They had never seen such an organization of a book. Other scholars said, this is a sihr al-halal. This is the halal sihr. This is the magic which is permissible, meaning it is a beautiful way of preserving biographies, and that person understood it. So the scholars of the past used to use the word sihr as a praiseworthy word to describe those who speak the truth and adorn it with beautiful words and a beautiful way of conveying it. However, the hadith is more often used as a warning, a refutation of people who would take falsehood and dress it up as the truth. Inna min al-bayani la sihra. And this is the more common way it was used by the companions themselves to refute and reject the people of falsehood who would dress up the falsehood as something good and something acceptable, to make it acceptable to the people, to give them what you call the Trojan horse, something that looks good and attractive so you let it in. And underneath that dressing of speech is pure falsehood. Now I ask you by Allah, if we are going to say that Tony Blair's rhetoric and his speech is effective and it reaches people's hearts, and if we are going to acknowledge that it is so effective, it is a kind of sihr al-bayan, it is a kind of magical speech. Wallahi, I ask you now, those of you who listen to Yasir Qadhi, pay attention, please. Is the sihr, the magical speech that Yasir Qadhi affirms for Tony Blair, is it of the first type, someone who speaks the truth, and he adorns the truth with beautiful preaching and beautiful words to make it reach the people's hearts? Is it that category? Is that what Tony Blair does? Or is it the second category, the more commonly used, the way this hadith has been used more commonly to discourage, to deter, to warn against people who would use it to dress up falsehood and make it acceptable to people? I ask you, in all fairness, knowing Tony Blair, what he has said, what he has done, how he chooses to speak about what he has done, you know the answer. You know that Tony Blair's rhetoric, Tony Blair's passionate speeches, Tony Blair's effective addresses to the people, you know, and don't lie to yourself, you know it's the second type. You know for a fact that he speaks with falsehood, as most politicians in the world do, if not all of them. He speaks with, and I mean Western politicians, he speaks with falsehood, and he tries to dress it up as being something acceptable. He speaks about the killing of Muslims in Muslim countries, and he dresses it up as freedom and democracy and liberty and, helping people and assisting people and so on. You know for a fact which sihr al-bayan Tony Blair has. Now I ask you by Allah, what has Yasir Qadhi benefited from Tony Blair when he says the first thing I benefited from was his sihr, his magical rhetoric, the way he can move a crowd, the way he can reach people? I ask you by Allah, which method of sihr, which method of magical speech did he learn from Tony Blair? And if you don't want to answer the question, you're only hiding from yourself. You're only hiding from the reality that you see in front of you. Let me give you right now, by Allah's permission, a clear example of how the sihr al-bayan of Tony Blair has rubbed off on Yasir Qadhi. Let me take you to the pre-Tony Blair Yasir Qadhi and what he said about the Rafidah, about the Shee'ah. These are from his earlier words.
Now, by the way, I'm speaking of the Shia religion based upon certain knowledge. I have their main book called Usul al-Kafi. I have looked over it. I have read their chapters.
Okay, he is telling you what? That he's basing what he says about the Shia upon certain knowledge. Not guesswork and not things that have been said, not hearsay, but certain knowledge from their own source books. Pay attention to that.
Okay, I know what the Shias believe. I'm not taking this from what the Shias say. The Shias are allowed to lie, and it's their religion to lie. Okay? Any person who knows the Shias knows this. It is their religion to lie. 90% of the religion, by their own statement, is lying.
He says it is a religion of lying. A religion of lying. Let me take you a little bit more into his speech until he says...
first to reject it. Wallahi, Shi'ism is filth. I'm saying this to you. Shi'ism is filth. You read their stuff, they allow prostitution, as you know, called mut'ah.
He says that Shi'ism is filth. Shi'ism is filth. I ask you by Allah, when you talk about temporary marriages, prostitution being from Islam, when you talk about the Imams of the Shia knowing the unseen more than the prophets, when you talk about their love of cursing righteous and noble companions and making it their religion, was his statement Shi'ism is filth? Was it haqq or batil? Wallahi, answer with truth, answer with justice. Be a witness for the truth, even if it is against your sheikh, even if it is against your Western hero. Be a witness for the truth. Recognize truth for what it is. That was a statement of truth.
You know, they allow lying. They allow so many things that any Muslim is going to reject.
They allow so many things that any Muslim is going to reject. That is a statement of truth.
And when you read their chapters concerning this concept of prostitution, it is so disgusting. I even am embarrassed to say this to you.
He's talking about being embarrassed. As a side note, now his embarrassment is about the Muslim scholars and their fatwas on coffee. But going back to our topic, he is embarrassed. He is embarrassed to even mention the beliefs of the Shia. Now I'd like to just give you a little bit more about how much he knew about the Shia. So when we show the contrast, you'll know that what he said is based upon knowledge, based upon study from the foundations, from the source books of the Shia themselves. He says...
what their belief says. Of their beliefs is that their 12 Imams control the creation.
Their 12 Imams control the creation from their source books. That is a statement of truth. Their Imams, the Imams of the Shia, the Imams of the Rafidah, control, they say that their Imams control the creation. Listen to what he says, analyzing that belief.
They control the creation. What type of shirk is this?
He asks, what type of shirk is this? Analyzing the belief of the Shia, of the Rafidah.
Shirk and rububiyyah. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls the creation.
That is shirk in rububiyyah, meaning Allah's sole dominion over the creation. They have ascribed partners to Allah Ta'ala. He recognizes that and he teaches it so clearly. Now I would like to take you to a statement that was made just recently. In September of 2013, you find that Yasir Qadhi addressed Sunnis and Shiites.
Sahaba, companions of the Prophet ﷺ. We all know that there are two major positions in our history.
He says there are two major positions on the Sahaba in our history. And he is speaking, I guess, on behalf of Islam, Islamic history. You will see what he says now.
Some schools in Islam say that the Sahaba are righteous people, good people. They're the best generation after the Prophets.
So some schools in Islam believe that. Do you see this now? The introduction here is some schools believe that the Sahaba were righteous, which is an indication of what is going to come. If some schools believe that, then obviously other schools don't. Listen.
And they love the Sahaba and they consider it as a part of their religion to love the Sahaba. We understand other groups disagree. And
so now we have other groups of Muslims who disagree with this idea.
They say that the Sahaba disobeyed, or they did this or they did that, and they consider it a part of their religion to believe that many of the Sahaba, most of them, many of them, they went astray and they did not obey the Prophet ﷺ.
So he lightens his words up to say they went astray and they didn't obey. Now the reality, and he's speaking to a mixed audience with Shia in the audience. They're looking for him. They're looking from him something to have a grounds to say that he is no longer anti-Shiite. That's the whole point of this gathering. It was a Sunni Shiite gathering. Major agreements were made between Sunnis and Shiites. Compromises were made in writing. And Yasir Qadhi spoke at this event, speaking to a mixed group of people who are waiting for him to say statements of compromise, statements of building bridges, and so on. So he says, and some people believe that they had disobeyed. Now you know, after he explained what the madhab of the Rafidah are, or was, you know that it's a bit more than some companions went astray and some companions disobeyed. That is, of course, watering down what he knows to be the reality of the beliefs of the Rafidah.
Now, what is to be done about this? It's a very frank example.
So he goes on for about 10 minutes talking about what is to be done about this issue of differing. Now I'd like to introduce to you some very, very clear indications, or some very clear proofs, explicit proofs for the change of Yasir Qadhi, that which is recognized by the Sunnis and Shia themselves, by those at the, and I use the word Sunni loosely, for the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, and I shouldn't use it actually, the Ikhwaanee Shiite gatherings. That's more proper, not to say what they say Sunni Shiite. We should be saying Ikhwaanee Shiite gatherings. Naam, recognized by their leaders as being a changed man, a person who is no longer upon anti-Shiism. He is no longer against Shiism. That was announced at this gathering, publicly, by the leader of the gathering. Naam, go on to about 2 minutes into the audio. He goes on to say,
and with Shi'i theology, yet I will not.
I'll rewind a little bit here.
I teach and I preach and I believe Sunni theology.
Now I'd like to remind you, we're looking for, has he benefited from Tony Blair in Sihr al-Bayan? Listen to this.
I might disagree with Shi'ism and with Shi'i theology, yet I will not and I cannot allow any Sunni to physically harm a Shi'i or to blow up a Shi'i masjid or shrine. No matter how passionate I am about my theology, I have to speak out against anybody who tries to force that theology upon somebody else, who wishes to force by the stick, by the sword, by the bomb, that theology. Believe what you want to believe. Argue what you want to argue, but allow the freedom of somebody else to believe as they want to believe.
Now you have heard the kind of speech that you hear from politicians. Now you hear the Sihr al-Bayan, and wallahi it's Sihr al-Bayan. You see the people clapping and responding and cheering at this Ikhwaanee Shiite gathering. Not Sunni Shiite, Ikhwaanee Shiite gathering. You see them responding. You see them encouraging this kind of speech. You see them loving it and taking it in, because he's giving them exactly what they want. We must come together. We must hold hands. We must put aside our differences. He's giving this Ikhwaanee mixed Shiite audience the very usul of Ikhwan al-Muslimin on a platter, and they love it. So the Sihr al-Bayan, he is now taking the Shia as a group of people and their beliefs, and dressing it up, dressing this whole concept up as what some Muslims have believed throughout history. One preference in belief that some of the Muslims have held. Have you noticed that? And he is presenting that as something that is acceptable, something that is a right of freedom of expression or freedom of religion, as the Western democratic people say. You have the right to any belief you want. And now he is defending their right to believe and to hate the companions and so on. So, in fact, he has Sihr al-Bayan. Inna min al-bayani la sihra. You take the known disbelief of the Rafidah and you dress it up as a belief of some of the Muslims to an ignorant crowd of Ikhwanis and Shia, and they praise you for it. You have indeed benefited from Tony Blair, Yasir Qadhi. You have indeed learned the Sihr al-Bayan from Tony Blair, ya Yasir. Look at how he even discusses his previous beliefs.
More than just preaching the truth,
Listen
it
to
is
this.
tempering the truth with wisdom. And brothers and sisters, let me be very explicit here. I myself have learned from my mistakes.
He's going on to apologize for his previous statements, actually, to a Ikhwaanee, Shiite mixed gathering. Again, just before I mention that, I want to just point out a couple catchphrases of the Ikhwan. They say, believe as you want to believe and argue what you want to argue. That means keep your ideas, your aqeedah, as a theory and don't let it have any implementation. That is an Ikhwani type of thing. They might say, I'm Salafi in aqeedah. Right? But how they implement that, you find it has nothing to do with the understanding of the companions and the methodology of the Salaf of this ummah. So they are not Salafi at all. They may claim to be Salafi in aqeedah, to have the aqeedah of the righteous Salaf. But they say things like believe what you want to believe and argue what you want to argue, but don't preach hatred. Don't say a word of hatred. Don't manifest your love and hatred for Allah's sake. That's one thing. Further, we're going to notice another Ikhwani trick, and that is to consider hatred for Allah's sake to be equal to violence, meaning anyone who hates for Allah's sake must enact that hatred by acts of transgression and violence. And if they can convince you that that is, in essence, it goes hand in hand, hatred must have violence with it, that will help you, the innocent, unaware, everyday Muslim, that will help you to reject the concept of love and hatred in Islam. Wala and bara goes out the window, because bara, or hatred for Allah's sake, includes that you must attack someone. And that is not correct. Muslims who understand their religion, they love and they hate. And their love and their hatred has clear boundaries. And they are to follow the way of their religion in all cases. And they are not to enact unjust acts of transgression or violence in any case. So hatred does not necessitate unjust attacks, but that is the connection they wish you to say or to accept as a given, so that you will agree with them and say, then there must not be any hatred. There must not be any hatred. Here you'll see it in his retraction. You'll hear the equivalence of hatred and violence, or making hatred equal to violence. Listen to this.
2 decades ago, I as well gave inflammatory lectures and speeches. I said things that still haunt me to this day.
And of course he's talking about the likes of what I quoted to you earlier, that Shi'ism is filth and the kufr of the Shi'ah and so on.
It was a younger version. I can excuse myself that I was 20, 21 years old, but it doesn't change the fact I made mistakes and I smeared and I used inflammatory language.
So again, this is his retraction that's being expected. This is what is referred to by Muzammil Siddiqui as the changed Yasir Qadhi, who is no longer anti-Shiite.
That I myself now regret and I wish I could take back.
So he wishes he could take back his previous stance. Is it clear that Yasir Qadhi has changed or not? Because there are people who say that he went to Yale University for 8 years, but that doesn't mean he changed. You're just assuming that he changed. Wallahi, be truthful, be honest, be just. Look at what is in front of your face.
And the point being, brothers and sisters, all clerics of all stripes, they need to understand, yes, preach what you want to preach, but do not preach a hatred.
Do not preach a hatred. That is in direct contradiction to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who was, if you want to say it, a preacher of hatred for the sake of Allah, and a preacher of love for the sake of Allah. Not just a hate preacher, but a preacher of love and hatred for the sake of Allah. And Yasir Qadhi tells us, do not preach a hatred. Again, going back to one simple hadith of many, the firmest handholds in Islam or in Iman is that you love for the sake of Allah and you hate for the sake of Allah. But as Yasir Qadhi says, do not preach hatred. Why?
Do not preach a violence.
Do not preach hatred, do not preach violence. Look how he equates them.
Do not preach anything that will cause any one of your followers or people who look up to you to possibly bring about any type of physical harm on anyone else.
So now preaching hatred and preaching violence are one and the same, and they lead people to enact acts or, to take themselves into acts of violence or transgression, as you will see quite clearly, as you have seen quite clearly. Now I'd like to take you a little bit into the audio, to about the 7-minute mark of this video. It's entitled Violence and Hatred Towards Shi'ah, and it's on Yasir Qadhi's YouTube channel. He talks about the need to stand together. He says,
tolerant enough to understand that there's a time and a place to join hands.
Ikhwaanee catchphrase. There's a time and a place to join hands. What that means is, now is the time to hold hands with Ahlul Bid'ah, and in parentheses, there never will be a time to discuss the issues of Aqeedah. So we will always be putting them off, saying, now is not the time for that. Right? And the most important thing is that we unite and hold hands together.
There's a time and a place to show unity. There's a time and a place to ignore all of those differences.
So there is a time and a place to ignore all of those differences. Ikhwaanee catchphrase. Ignoring all of the differences to come together to hold hands. Meaning you hold hands with a man who hates you from his religion. He hates you because you believe Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was an upright Muslim. He hates you and he curses Abu Bakr as-Siddiq in his salah. He takes it as his deen. He believes that cursing Abu Bakr and Umar radiyallahu anhuma is from the finest and most virtuous acts of worship that he can perform as a Muslim. That's his religion. You are now holding hands with him, and you are going to put that aside because this is some kind of need. This is a time for unity. And I ask you by Allah, the year 2013 on the Christian calendar, and now into the year 2014, what is the necessity that the American Muslims are facing? What emergency are they up against that they have to hold hands with those who hate their religion? Those who are not Muslims, those who believe their imams know the unseen. What necessity requires us to do that? They will invent scenarios. They will manufacture issues and make them into dire emergencies. And you will know that because Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun, they do that as a habit. The Muslim Brotherhood manufacture events, manufacture necessities that require us to hold hands at every turn of our interactions. So you'll find them today saying, the Sharia is being banned in America, we have to come together. The Sharia is being banned. Have you heard this? The Sharia is being banned in America. How can we not be united when the Sharia is being banned? Subhanallah. What Sharia was implemented in America so that it's now being banned? What are you talking about Sharia is being banned? Sharia has not been implemented in America. Subhanallah. Exalted be Allah, what a buhtan, what a lie. You invent an issue that doesn't exist to bring the Muslims together, to tell them it's an emergency, and you have to put all things aside because the Sharia is being banned? What do you mean the Sharia is being banned? The Sharia has never been implemented. Subhanallah. Inventing, manufacturing a fake political emergency by which we need to come together. I'd like to further draw your attention to more sihr of bayan, where he equates believing and being firm in your belief to forcing your beliefs on other people, which is another Ikhwaanee trap to make you give up the firmness in your beliefs. Listen.
Imbibe it and replicate it. Yes, I might disagree with many theologies, but it's not my right to force my theology on other people. Brothers and sisters, these differences have been with the ummah for...
Now, he equates forcing beliefs on people as being firm and loving and hating for the sake of Allah. So if I love for the sake of Allah, and I hate for the sake of Allah, and I warn against innovation and its people with speech that resembles the speech of the Salaf, I will be blamed by the Ikhwaanis. I will be told, it will be said about me that I am a person who is trying to force my beliefs on other people. An Ikhwaanee catchphrase. Watch for it, you will see it with Al-Ikhwan al-Muslimun. You have every right as a Muslim, even under the kuffar's understanding of the freedom of belief. You have every right to love and hate whomever you choose. So you have every right as a Muslim to love and hate and to speak about your love and your hatred for the sake of Allah. Yet the Ikhwaanis, even while this is acceptable to the kuffar and their freedom of religion and freedom of beliefs, they wish to strip you of that right by equating your love, your open love, and your open hatred for the sake of Allah as forcing beliefs on people.
1,000, 1,200, 1,400 years.
Now he's going to show you how long these differences have existed, and he's going to give you or encourage you to take a stance of a person who doesn't do anything about it, because it has existed for so long.
Do you think that our hatred together will eliminate this? No.
Now this is a plot again from the Ikhwan and Muslimin, another hatched plot. That do you think your hatred will cause Ahlul Bid'ah to go away, or that the differences between us and them will go away because you hate them? Will we come together and hate for the sake of Allah, and this hatred will cause the people of Bid'ah to be guided or to go away and no longer bother us? That is the plot. That's not our goal. When we manifest our love and our hatred for the sake of Allah, we do it as an act of ibadah for Allah. It is our aqeedah. We realize that this will not make the differences go away. This will not make the people of Bid'ah go away. Allah Ta'ala, from His divine qadr, has tested us by placing us in a world full of desires and deviation, full of whims and full of doubts and confusion in the religion. So we must spend our lives repelling confusion. We must spend our lives repelling disobedience, pushing it away, keeping ourselves patient upon obedience to Allah and the correct beliefs. That is our job as a Muslim. Not that we believe that our patience upon obedience will make all disobedience go away, nor will our patience upon our correct aqeedah and our hatred for the people of deviation, we don't believe that will make them go away. So don't fall for the Ikhwani tricks.
We're going to have this. Let's be pragmatic. Let's be realistic. These schisms, these sects will remain no matter what we want. So let's try to do something that we all agree to, and that is to make the world a better place.
Then from all of this speech, you get a man saying we need to hold hands together, cooperate together, because now is not the time for disunity, and we need to, quote unquote, make the world a better place. Has he been affected by sihr al-bayan, by the magical rhetoric of Tony Blair? If you told me that this was Tony Blair saying, let's come together and make the world a better place, I would believe you. And if you would have told me 10 years ago that Yasir Qadhi is speaking at ISNA, telling a mixed gathering, including the Shee'ah, that we need to come together and make the world a better place, I would not have believed you back then. But I would have believed you that it was Tony Blair. Wallahi, be honest and be just. Now you have Yasir Qadhi telling a group of Shi'ah mixed with Ikhwanis that we come together and we hold hands together and we make the world a better place. Then he says the catchphrase of every ignorant Ikhwani standing on every corner on Allah's earth:
let Allah be the judge. Let Allah be the judge.
Oh, how they love that. Let Allah be the judge. Let Allah be the judge. So if we let Allah be the judge, meaning, that's a catchphrase again. It is a beautiful statement on the outside that people love to hear. Inside it means, don't take a stance for your religion. Don't have love and hatred for the sake of Allah. Don't manifest any love and hatred. Don't believe you're on the haqq. And don't believe that someone else is on falsehood. Don't believe like that. Believe that everybody has some good intentions and everybody has good in them. And don't believe that there are such thing called people of bid'ah or people of falsehood. But let Allah be the judge.
In this dunya, we can all agree that we shouldn't be killing one another, harming one another, physically being threatening to one another.
Again, reinforcing the equation, making love and hatred for the sake of Allah equal to killing each other and fighting each other. Now he brings one more trick, one more sihr al-bayan, one more Ikhwani catchphrase, one more concept by which the Ikhwan al-Muslimun use to deter people from keeping the correct beliefs and maintaining stability upon the correct beliefs. It is that when you hold to the correct beliefs and you are firm upon them, that you are arrogant. Have you heard that before? When you know the correct beliefs, and you openly call to them, and you identify false beliefs that are in contradiction to the book and the sunnah, you will always hear someone saying what? You're arrogant. Arrogance, al-kibr, is batar al-haq wa ghamt al-nas. It is rejecting the truth with its evidences and looking down on the people. You holding to the truth makes you gharib, it makes you from Ahl al-Sunnah, it makes you from al-Firqat al-Najiyah, it makes you from the saved sect. Holding to the truth in times of fitna, in the face of opposition, in the face of mass deviation, that makes you a Muslim upon your deen, holding on to coals in times of fitna. And of course, it will be said about you that you are arrogant. That comes with the program. If you're going to hold to this religion, it will be said about you that you are arrogant. Listen to Yasir Qadhi.
This is not the role of any Muslim. Finally, brothers and sisters, finally, reminder to myself and all of you, we should always be careful of the greatest sin that we are in danger of
the greatest sin now. The greatest sin, no longer shirk, it's something else.
Committing when we talk about sectarianism, and that is the sin of arrogance.
There it is, like I told you, that you are an arrogant person if you love and hate for the sake of Allah, if you stick to your religion, if you say Shi'ism is filth, if you say it's kufr, it's outside of Islam, then you're a person who attacks the Muslims. You're a person who preaches violence. You're a person who is, arrogant as well. You're a person who, you believe you're on the truth, you believe you're in paradise, and everyone else is in the hellfire. How many times have you heard this from people, from Ikhwaanees themselves or those affected by Ikhwaanees? All of the time. This is their most common phrase that they say in the face of the truth that they don't want to accept. You're arrogant.
The sin of arrogance. Sure, I might believe that my theology is right.
So he's talking about theology, theory, nadariya, something that's abstract, something that's in my mind. Because to Yasir Qadhi, his theology is limited to that. It does not transcend into actions on the limbs. And that is a major deviation in Islam. And he is preaching this to the masses, that your theology may not transcend into action.
But let that not translate into believing that I am, as a person, am better than somebody else as a person who disagrees with my theology.
So there's the Ikhwaani trick again, that me believing that I am upon the truth in an issue or in the deen in general, because I have the beliefs of the companions, because I have the understanding of the companions, for me to believe that I am correct, and someone else who curses the companions, who believes that his imams know the unseen, and that they're going to resurrect Aisha radiallahu anha, our mother, and punish her for adultery again and again. Their imams will do that in their beliefs. For me to believe that that is wrong, and to be convinced and have conviction that that is wrong, I'm in danger of becoming arrogant, because I will think I am better than that person. That's what they want you to believe, that when you have that firm conviction that you're upon the truth with evidences and clear proofs from the book and the sunnah, and that person is upon deviance with clear proofs from the book and the sunnah, they want to equate this with arrogance, that you believe that you're in paradise, and you believe that that person is in the hellfire, and you believe you are better than that person. Wallahi, that is not arrogance, ikhwan. That's recognizing the truth, adopting it, accepting it, identifying it for what it is, and identifying falsehood for what it is, rejecting it and staying far away from it. That's called the religion of Islam. That's called humility to Allah. That's called submitting to Allah with tawheed and istislam and submission to Allah. That's not called arrogance.
The theology might be right. I am not perfect. I am not perfect. And we make a distinction between belief and between the person. Perhaps I have a sin. Perhaps my sin is arrogance. And that arrogance means I think I'm better than you.
And he goes on to the end of his speech here. I want it to be very clear to you. Look at these occasions where we've stopped here. And you've seen in each case the truth being dressed up as falsehood. You've seen sihr al-bayan ala wajhihi. You've seen real magical rhetoric. You've seen a person, Yasir Qadhi, who used to be kind of boring to listen to. Now he's under the tutelage of Tony Blair acknowledging that openly. And now he gives passionate Western political styled speeches to move the crowd. Now you'll see in his speech patterns that which resembles the speech of politicians trying to win over audiences by dressing up falsehood, by dressing up lies, by dressing up misguidance as being something acceptable, as being something beautiful, as being good manners, as being middle course and balance and all of that. You'll find him dressing up falsehood and presenting it to the people as something good and truthful. And that is exactly the sihr al-bayan that our Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam warned us against. He warned us against this sihr al-bayan by saying that some of the bayan is magical. Be warned of it is the understanding of the hadith. Not that you should go after anyone who can move a crowd and change what the message is that he wants to say, that is actually negative and full of falsehood, into something beautiful and acceptable to the people. That is not a skill we want to learn. That is not anything that we wish to learn from anyone. We wish that Allah Ta'ala will purify our tongues and keep our tongues things that make this dhikr of Allah and speak about Allah and His religion with truth and with goodness in a way that is beautiful and something that guides the people. We ask Allah Ta'ala to guide us to all of that. So I say to you, in summary, Naam, yes, Yasir Qadhi has indeed openly acknowledged that he has studied under Tony Blair. His teacher was Tony Blair. And you will see, for the 8 years at Yale University, a list of his teachers. None of them are anyone that you would be proud to study Islam under. But yet he studied under them for 8 years. He wants you to believe that he made a statement to Tony Blair which justifies his whole participation in that. And it is so much falsehood. It is just another example of dressing up falsehood and making it look like truth. He says, I said to Tony Blair, face to face, right to his mouth, as he said, if you believe in a God, then you have to answer to him for what you have done to the people of Iraq. And he gets a big takbir from the audience. We say in response, Yasir, you studied under him for an entire semester, and you claim that you said this. We don't trust you that you even said that. But you claim you said that. Was this the da'wah of our Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam that you claim to follow in doing that? Did our Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam stand up on Safa and announce to the kuffar of Quraysh that they have committed an act of transgression politically, that they have invaded a country with falsehood or wrongly, and they'll be accountable for their act of terrorism or their act of invading a country wrongly? Or did he stand up and invite them to Tawheed? Yasir, did you invite Tony Blair to accept Islam and to shun what is worshipped besides Allah? Is that the message that you brought to Tony Blair? Or was the message that if you believe in a God, he will ask you about what you did to Iraq? What does that have to do with the da'wah of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam? That's one point. Secondly, is it a necessary requirement for us to enroll in programs of study, making us a student under the kuffar who are considered experts in their field, putting us in a position of lowliness and servitude and under these people for an entire semester to get in a word of advice? Is that what the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam did? Do you really want us to believe that the only way to approach Tony Blair or make a statement to Tony Blair is to enroll in a course at Yale University for an entire semester? If it was an entire semester, but it was an entire course as he described, and usually we know courses to be semesters or quarters, or at least. So you enroll in an entire course to study under Tony Blair, and then you make one statement and that you believe that justifies what the scholars say is impermissible? You believe that justifies degrading yourself, making yourself an official student, an official understudy in a postgraduate program at a non-Muslim university? That's disgraceful. And you got people cheering for you, saying, now he brought the truth. Now he explained himself. That's idiocy. That's not from our religion, subhanallah. You can go to Tony Blair whenever you have the opportunity and tell him to worship Allah alone. You don't have to go to Yale University and enroll as a student in a course that he teaches and study under him for an entire semester. But the reality is you wanted to do that. It wasn't that you wanted to convey a message to him. That justification that you offer is phony. You wanted to study under him, and you said it yourself. You would do it again and again, under Bush or Blair or anybody. You wanted to do that. You learned from Tony Blair how to dress up falsehood and make it look good to the people. That's the skill you learned. That's the sihr al-bayan that you openly acknowledge that you learned from him. And don't try to explain it as something else because you've openly acknowledged it. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to guide Yasir Qadhi back to the correct understanding of Islam, and to keep his influence away from innocent Muslims, and to protect the Muslims who want good in their religion and mistakenly think well of him. We ask Allah Ta'ala to protect them. وصلى اللهم وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله